Welcome to Grimsby Connected. I'm your host, Daniel Vandersteen. Industry plays an important role in Niagara's economy, and a lot of us don't know that much about what's happening in the industrial sector, in the industrial development of the region, but there are big things happening and a lot that we should be looking at. And so rather than do my own research, because I'm a terrible researcher, I thought we would go right to the source. My guest today is Jordan Sherlock, the Executive Director of the Niagara Industrial Association. Jordan, thanks so much for coming.
Hey, Daniel, thanks for having me.
So,
by the way, I got to tell you, forgive me if I call you your brother's name. We were just talking about this off air. I know your brother, so I might call you Alex today.
That's fine. If you do, of the three of them, that would be one of the better ones you could pick.
Perfect. Good.
So thanks so much for joining us. Why don't you just tell us a bit about the NIA? Because I think most people don't really know that you exist.
Well, that's disappointing. Everybody should know about the NIA. Yeah, first off, I want to say it's really cool to be in this space here in Grimsby. I'm actually from Grimsby originally. Okay. So this is kind of serendipitous because this is also, as we were just discussing, my first podcast ever. So from Grimsby, first podcast. But yeah, onto the NIA. We're actually, and this is why everyone should know us, we'll be entering our 20th year in 2020.
Wow.
So yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah,
been around for a long time. The NIA was really born out of. I still say to this day that the NIA is community first. It's a community first. It's a network first. And we were kind of born out of that as a central focus when things were first started 20 years ago. At that time, we had a lot of OEMs, a lot of larger industry kind of leaving the region, going to
and can you areas. Explain OEMs for people?
OEMs, I believe OEM means the acronym is Original Equipment Manufacturer, I think. So an OEM is somebody who wouldn't make, say, like a part or a widget. They would make a final, like a finished.
Okay, so they're taking all the individual components and assembling it.
Correct, yeah. The widget people would be called maybe second or third tier suppliers. So the NIA was kind of founded by a bunch of these second and third tier suppliers who had supplied a lot of these OEMs when they were booming way back when. So we had this mass exodus of some larger manufacturing, still had a lot of good quality, smaller manufacturers here, a lot of expertise, a lot of know-how, a lot of good workers, a lot of good capacity and capability. But kind of looking around saying, how are we going to continue as a sector here in Niagara? Niagara was known as, an industrial powerhouse. I think, in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of big steel here. Port Colborne had the Inco plant, which was nickel mining, I believe. So a lot of historical big industry across Niagara. But the NIA, again, was founded based on the idea of creating kind of a community that was here to support each other. I think their original slogan was competitors in the field, partners in industry is what it says on your website. I love that. Something like that. So yeah, so the idea was, hey, some of us may kind of compete against each other or, be going after the same markets, but in this kind of carve out, we're trying to work together to support each other within industry because we're all kind of facing the same challenges. And that was the start of things. And we started very, very grassroots, getting together for kind of coffee hours once in a while. Hey, what's going on? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? And it's just evolved over the years. When I started with the NIA, probably in 2014, 2015, one of the big focuses was around workforce and training, getting young people into and interested into the trades and into manufacturing jobs. That continues to be a huge focus today. We have many kind of partnerships and ongoing conversations happening with our school boards at the post-secondary level, as well with Niagara College and Brock University primarily, and really trying to get young people interested in these vocations. These aren't, this isn't your great-grandfather working in some dirty forge back in 1945 or something like that. A lot of these operations today are clean, they're well-paying, they're stable jobs. So I'm kind of digressing here, but the NIA today, we're really focused on, the continuity of the sector here in Niagara. We're seeing thank God. And finally, we're seeing kind of a return to manufacturing from the federal and provincial level, where there's been a lot of emphasis, a lot of money being thrown at manufacturing and the skilled trades. And I think it's because folks, some folks have kind of woken up and said, like, we need manufacturing. We know what's going on geopolitically around the world. We know what happened during COVID, where suddenly you find out how globalization can kind of expose you and make you a bit vulnerable if you're not able to do certain things yourself. I think Canada was very much kind of stuck in that area where it's like, oh my gosh, how are we going to get masks or PPE or things like that? And really manufacturing is at the core of those conversations when you talk about being able to be more self-sustaining. Everything in this room was manufactured somewhere. I always say that to folks. You can pretty much walk into any room anywhere and everything was made somewhere.
Right.
So I think here in Niagara, we still have that really strong foundational capability and capacity and skill set. And it's, we've kind of come full circle now, I think, in our 20-year, 10-year, where the mission is kind of is still the same, but our focus is a little bit different in that we were kind of desperately finding ways to kind of stay alive and stay vital 20 years ago. Today, the tide has kind of turned where we're now trying to kind of manage and be a voice of what we're seeing in terms of the spotlight being shone on industry, if you want to.
So, I mean, you're founded in 2007, 2008 financial crash. And then since then, of course, there's been, there was more financial turbulence in the 2010s, COVID, now we're in a trade war. So just a super fun, chill time to be an industrial association.
Yeah. And a manufacturer. Manufacturers have had it really.
Right, yeah. So I'm going to list some fast facts that I did pull just because I think it's really interesting and it helps contextualize like some of the people, the groups that you represent. From your website, in Niagara, $2.5 billion in GDP from the industrial sector, 21,800 jobs across 670 businesses, 26.2 million square feet of manufacturing area, which I did the math, is 455 football fields. And that's my favorite useless way to measure an area of something.
I like that. How many football fields is your factory? Yeah,
right.
That's good.
I don't know. I don't play football, so that means nothing to me, but I hear it all the time of how many football fields it is. But football fields are pretty big. Yeah. There's an interesting distribution of different industries, but I did find it interesting that fabricated metal products was number one by both jobs and number of businesses. Because I think Hamilton has a reputation for like steel and metal products, but I don't know that people know how much of that gets produced in Niagara as well. And it's like, it's an invisible line.
Yes.
But, when we're talking about the issues that we're looking at for Grimsby and Niagara, that line can exist sometimes.
A lot of people forget that Grimsby is in Niagara, by the way.
Yes, we're the gateway to Niagara. We're on the edge. Yeah. And it is interesting because depending on who you talk to and where they work and what they do, everybody either looks one direction towards St. Catharines and the Falls, or they look another direction to Hamilton, but very few people seem to consider both. Yes. And in my experience, it tends to be more of a theoretical wall to Hamilton, and people look more towards St. Catharines and the Falls. But it depends on what you do. Yeah. And then the Skyway feels like it forms a border of its own. Yep. Because it's a horrible bridge, and I hate it. It's terrible. So, in terms of people who aren't necessarily in trades or in the industry, why would you say the average person should care about the NIA and the work that you do?
That's a great question. And in my introductory rant, I forgot to mention some of the other things that we do. And I think this is important, and it goes back to some of the numbers you just pointed out. Like 650 plus businesses, that's not nothing for a population of, 500,000 or so?
Across the region.
So that's a lot. And then the numbers in terms of employment, between 22 and 25,000 roughly, a lot of jobs. The key that's, I don't think, in those numbers that I've always found perhaps the most interesting or telling, or maybe the most, the best tie-in to why the NIA is necessary, is something like 85% of those businesses have between 1 and 50 employees. So true small businesses, and a lot of those 1 to 50 employee businesses, it's more like, 1 to 20 kind of thing. So these are companies that are often, I call them mom and pops, it multi-generational family business. The grandfather or great-grandfather started it, way back when. And the generations have just continued on, and they do things that are very specialized, very unique, often very niche. These companies don't necessarily have the resources to grow in the way that they might want to, say, on paper. The owners are often operators as well, so the owner might be a lead hand on the floor or an operator of a piece of equipment in addition to running the company. So you have that very interesting, and I really like this fact about our manufacturing companies in Niagara, is that they can be nimble and they can be creative and they can be super resilient to all the crises you just labeled off that have happened in the last 20 years. They can respond in a way that that is oftentimes very successful and very resilient. But an NIA helps these businesses. We say we're kind of the voice and hand of industry, the voice part being kind of on the advocacy side, but the hand part, truly, it's like, let's help you. You might not have an HR department. You probably don't even have an HR person. You might not have an outside sales team. That might be you, the owner. We act as an extension of these companies to try to help bring access to resources, make good connections for them, so that they don't have to go out and do the work themselves and say, hey, I'm really trying to do this, but I don't know how to get there. I can't pull people off my shop floor to go and do that work or look into it properly. We can be more of kind of that phone call away thing to say, like, this is what I'm looking for. Cool. Give Daniel a call. He can help you. And it kind of gets folks through that front door sometimes. So again, Niagara lends itself to an NIA being very successful because of some of these firmographics and demographics that you pointed out. A lot of companies, a lot of diversity within what we do. We're not a Hamilton in that we're just,
right. There's a lot of different people doing different things.
A ton of diversity, but really that factor of, the small business component, 1 to 50 employees. I think that's critical. And it is frankly one of our biggest challenges for Niagara's manufacturing sector, because you do have a lot of, I call them legacy owners. So maybe you're in the third generation of a company's ownership. They might not have the next generations waiting in the wings to take over the company. So we're going to be faced in the next 5 to 10 years with these owners kind of getting to an age out stage and perhaps not having a fantastic exit strategy. So that's something else that we're kind of
I think we've seen that. I know it's been discussed at the chamber, both in Niagara and at the Ontario chamber level, of succession planning, and a lot of like you said, these legacy businesses. There's nothing wrong with the business. It's just maybe they didn't have kids, or their kids aren't interested, and there's nobody else in the management team that wants the responsibility. It's an interesting challenge. But it's a lot of what you talked about, I think, is such a great overlap with the work that the chamber does, and that's why we wanted to have you on as our first guest, as we figure out if all of the cameras work.
Yeah,
we didn't know. I'm hoping it's seamless, and everybody thinks we've done 100 of these, even though you can check our feed history. It's clearly the second episode. But I think the chamber is also, like, we exist in that space of, for small businesses that don't have the resources to onboard the kind of help and assistance that you have. So it sounds like there is not overlap, but synergy between the kinds of work that we do. So that's great. I love, I think a big part of collaboration in the spirit of the chamber is that we're stronger together, and it doesn't always make sense for, like you said, a mom and pop shop to have a full-time HR person. So then let's group together and have that resource, and then we don't all have to pay for a full-time HR person that we don't need.
The other thing that's interesting, just to piggyback on that, Daniel, and I'm seeing this more. I think this is happening more as a community, and perhaps it's a result of the COVIDs and some of the other things. But we're not just you compared us to a chamber, for example, and I agree. I think we're very similar to what a chamber does, but just more focused. Mm-hmm. But we're having good discussions around tables in rooms like these as community partners and industry leaders, and we're trying to, I hate using the word solve, but we're trying to dissect and work on some of the challenges that we as leaders of industry associations and chambers are aware of through our membership feedback.
Sure.
Rebecca Shelley and I sit on a few of these, for example, and So that's just another example of ways in which, as community leaders, we are trying to tackle problems on behalf of small businesses. Workforce, again, I think being the number one today, where this is an issue across the board, is access to good quality people. And frankly, on the numbers side of things, when we talk about generations and demographic shifts, it's just simply replacing the number of boomers that are aging out right now,
right,
with the generations coming up. So, there's so much of this conversation going on in this community. It's really good.
Mm-hmm. And that that generation thing. We're not going to get too deep into this but I'm just going to say it so that nobody says I didn't say it. But AI, I said it. Oh, no. We're going to move on.
We're not going to bring that topic up.
We would have a whole other episode if we get into that. We're not getting into that. So we've kind of danced around this a little bit, but more directly. At present, in the current socioeconomic situations that we find ourselves in, how would you say industry in Niagara is doing?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Daniel, because that's the question I get asked the most.
Sure.
In my travels. How is manufacturing in Niagara doing today? It's sometimes it's actually framed more directly to an ongoing issue. So, for example, the tariff situation that landed on us last year. How are your manufacturers dealing with the tariff situation? And the answer is obviously it depends on the manufacturer, it depends on the business, it depends on the industry, the market, it depends on a ton of factors. But generally speaking, my answer around how is manufacturing doing in Niagara is it's doing well. And I think back to what we were discussing before, arguably the biggest, there's a few reasons for that, but I would say arguably the biggest is our diversity. We are not one sector. We're not an auto sector, right? We've heard about what's happened to auto in Ontario in the last year or so. Some businesses might be going over, some bumps right now, for example, but again, back to the tariff thing. But as a whole, the sector continues to grow. And something else that I like to use as kind of an example or an anecdote as to why Niagara continues to grow in the manufacturing sector is, and this was somebody who was in construction said this to me, and it was interesting because when you live in Niagara, you don't necessarily think about it this way, but he referred to Niagara as the final frontier in southwestern Ontario. And as a construction person, he's building large industrial plants all across Ontario, let's say, for the last many decades. There's not a lot of place and space to build anymore. We've kind of saturated what we have here, but Niagara has kind of been under the radar for quite some time. A lot of available lands. The word available is, I use that loosely because, we have a lot of land that can be developed on. Let's just say that. So when businesses are looking to grow or to land here, Niagara is a very attractive spot. And I would say even today, but up until last year for sure, proximity to the U.S. border, very attractive for many businesses who do.
Still is. Even with the circumstances,
is.
And the circumstances will change again.
Yeah.
And it's still a resource that we have.
Yeah, and especially, multinationals, let's say, who are looking to expand into Ontario or into Niagara, you're right. Like, they're not factoring, they're going to continue to factor.
They have a more than 4-year plan.
Correct. Yeah. So the border proximity is interesting. So, yes, I think we're doing quite well. We've seen a lot of growth here in the last couple of years. We've seen 2 or 3 very large companies, coming to town, so to say. We've seen investment from a lot of the municipalities into acquiring and expanding industrial space. You guys here in Grimsby have a beautiful, around the corner from where we're at, new industrial park. So that shows me that there's investment happening from municipalities and other partners into, it's kind of like an if you build it, they will come type, strategy. And we've seen that. We've seen the price and cost of industrial lands, raised significantly. That kind of goes back to some of the succession planning we were talking about. It unfortunately or fortunately becomes kind of an attractive retirement plan if you're one of these owners we were discussing earlier and you've got this chunk of industrial property that has probably been paid off since 1980 or something like that, and suddenly it's worth, $300,000-$400,000 an acre or something like that. So yeah, that's probably a long way of saying that that industry here, manufacturing is, I think, very strong, and there's a lot on the horizon, I think, coming down the pike that we can expect.
I think that's great. You don't get a lot of positive economic stories these days, so it's nice to hear.
Why is that?
That might be a different podcast. Okay. But no, I think that's super exciting. And you kind of touched on one of my other questions, which is, we talk about Niagara has tremendous land. We have great stable electricity. We have border proximity. You have, I believe it was around 270 members in Niagara, and 12 of your members are based in Grimsby. And so what do you think makes an industrial company choose one municipality in Niagara over another?
Oh, boy.
Is that a loaded question?
That is a loaded question.
Oh, no.
No, but it's a good one.
That was an easy one.
It's loaded because, there's some element, I think, of politics that comes into part of that.
That's a great segue,
which is
to my next question.
I can see where you're going here. It is 2026, right? In October is coming.
Well, it does say elections series on
I didn't see that. Okay, you got
fancy video background.
Well, it's, I think for the NIA and for me personally, we're called the Niagara Industrial Association for a reason, because we're here to support industry in Niagara, agnostic of municipalities. The fact that there is an answer to that question that you just asked is kind of, in my opinion, it shouldn't be that way. If somebody is interested in landing or expanding in Niagara, I think we should be working very closely as a region with that company to find out specifically what their needs are, what's most important to them. Is it proximity to the border? Is it proximity to Toronto? Okay, well, Fort Erie versus Grimsby, there's some decisions to be made there. The things that shouldn't be impacting those decisions are things like time to permit and red tape and bureaucracy. And I think sometimes those things do leak into the decisions that businesses are making around, should I go to Grimsby or should I go to Welland? Sure. And we know that kind of ebbs and flows depending on councils and what's going on in certain municipalities at any given time. But I think, again, as an industry association representing Niagara, part of our mandate or our message would be, let's try to make things as consistent as possible so that how we're supporting and servicing members and prospective members is really agnostic of the municipality. Sure. It should be in Niagara.
Well, and I agree with that. Ideally, you would want, if somebody wants to build a factory, whether they want to build it in Grimsby or Beamsville or St. Catharines, the process should be as similar as possible so that it's a fair play. Obviously, this is a Grimsby show. We're the Grimsby Chamber, so I'm going to plug Grimsby. But I think we can celebrate development in other, like the Asai Kasei plant in Port Colborne is still going to have an economic impact on Grimsby because we're not that far away.
Right.
And people who live or who work in these other communities may choose to live in Grimsby for a variety of other reasons. So I do think we're all in this together.
Well, and that's the Asai Kasei is a great example of the factors that should be taken into consideration. I mean, there's nowhere in Grimsby that plant could have fit.
It wouldn't have made sense here.
Checkbox number one, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, when it becomes questions around like who has the most favorable development charge incentives, well, shouldn't they just be across the board the same? Yeah. Who has the fastest time to permit? Who am I going to have the least amount of bureaucratic red tape to get through just to get my building up and running? Those are the factors we would like to see, kind of get mitigated.
And so it's I'm going to throw this to you because I think you'll do a better job of answering the question. But for people watching this or listening to this who maybe are not as into like the economic development background and all of that, can you just explain development charges? Because it's something that I think is going to come up with virtually everyone that I talk to. So I just, for the record, what are development charges?
Development charges are the bane of my existence.
Okay, I don't think that's quite the dictionary definition.
It's something like that. No, and I will mess this up because I'm not I'm actually a manufacturer by my background, so I am not. I should have said that at the beginning. I mean, this is
we gave you no background, no
whatsoever.
bio.
That's okay. It's our first try here.
I just said your title.
Never too late. But when I was in manufacturing, and I ran a company that was growing. We kind of started out from very humble beginnings and grew very quickly over a period of time. Nobody in the company that I worked for knew what development charges were. And we didn't really care about those kind of peripheral things like property taxes and permits and stuff like that. It was just kind of like, hey, we're growing. We need more space to build more widgets.
Sure.
That's what we do best. And then it's just kind of surprise after surprise after surprise.
Right.
And development charges tends to be one of those things. Development charges, in my opinion, I think most bureaucrats you talk to will tell you it's not a tax, but in my mind, it's a tax. The term that is often used that I can't stand when we talk about, what are development charges and why do they exist is growth has to pay for growth. That's kind of the phrase. So if you picture, I always like to use this in my head to kind of understand, where these things came from. If you were a large company, let's say you were, Ford Motor Company way back, and you were growing, you needed to make more cars. The only way you can make more cars is, well, we've outgrown this factory. We got to build another factory somewhere else that's strategically going to benefit us as a business. Okay, cool. Well, you looked around and there's nothing but unserviced farmland everywhere you look. So where are we going to build this factory? Well, let's go build it over there. Well, someone has to pay to service that property, and someone has to pay to build roads to, there's going to be more traffic from employees driving into this place, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe in the surrounding areas, you're going to be hiring 500 people. So now you have to build houses and you have to build playgrounds for kids and community centers, et cetera. So the idea was that and this is my own story, by the way.
Sure.
This is probably not true, but
don't quote him on
this. Don't quote me, please. But the idea was, well, you, Ford, have to pay for growth. You guys want to grow as a company. You have to help us service this property. Like, you can't ask the municipality to service this farm field. So that's what a development charge is, simply a tax to service the growth that your business is going to create peripherally in that municipality. So again, if you're a business that's been operating in Niagara for 50 years, paying your property taxes, employing dozens of people, contributing in all kinds of economic ways, and you want to put a 5,000 or 10,000 square foot expansion on your building because you want to build more widgets, explain to me why that company's growth, they're going to grow, why did they have to pay in order to facilitate that growth? And where are those dollars going to go? Is it to build a playground downtown? Is it to fix all the potholes in the road that haven't been fixed for 20 years? There's really not good explanation as to where all these dollars go. But the bigger thing for me, I think, besides all of that, what are DCs? This is a provincially mandated thing, so they have to be charged. Niagara has always had, not always, for a long period of time, had very strong incentives, rebate programs, basically either deferred or eliminated for the business. So the company hasn't had to pay development charges. The municipalities have had to. By the way, we have a 2-tier municipal system, so we have a region to deal with as well as whatever municipality you're in.
Yeah, and they both set their development charges at different levels.
Oftentimes.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot of those programs kind of go away, or we're seeing DC rates going up. And I just think we need to find, and we have for a long time, competitive advantage for companies to have an incentive and desire to stay here.
Right.
Multinationals especially can literally pull out a map of the globe and say point to the place that it's going to be cheapest for us to build our our widgets.
Yeah, so it's a lever that we can adjust if we want to make ourselves more competitive.
If we want to. And we've done it for some time, but we're seeing that kind of erode a little bit. And, we know about the budget situation in Niagara here, and we know that there are things that need to be done. And, hey, if I'm a politician, DCs are a really good way to pay for a lot of these things. But small businesses typically cannot afford it, and they're not aware or thinking of it when they're thinking of their growth plans.
Right.
This is not a cost that you can go to your bank and get financed. Hey, I need an extra $500,000 to pay this development charge.
Right.
And you certainly can't pass it on to your customers. So it's really an out-of-pocket cost that there's zero benefit to the business. They're not going to get, again, if you're a business that's been operating here for years and years,
they won't generate more revenue as a result of having spent
zero.
the DCs on top of it. The theory of using the money to build out the infrastructure that the new business will need does sound conceptually sound, but unless there's like a line itemed, here's what we actually took the money and did, it feels like it just goes into the pot at the town.
And to kind of make matters worse, and maybe this is a good way to round out this conversation, because this is where the NIA's focus is. So as we've discussed, NIA is primarily focused on supporting existing businesses in Niagara. New businesses coming in, great. If now you're an existing business, so we'd love to support you in whatever way we can. But for existing companies, NIA members who have, again, been contributing to this community for a very long time, DCs are one of those things that we fight against because we don't want to see it. But oftentimes we use DC exemptions as a carrot to attract companies from out of town or out of country, right? So as an attraction strategy, we say, hey, if you come to, you're choosing between Buffalo and Niagara region. If you come here, we'll waive your development charges.
Sure.
We'll cover them. Oh, that's great. Of course, that's going to be, if all else is equal, that's one thing that we're going to look at. But that's a great attraction strategy, and we use that as an attraction strategy. But sometimes we forget about that as a reason to incentivize and support existing companies. So, I just want, again, back to what we said earlier, that whole consistency thing. Are there development charges? Are there not?
Right.
Is it in the bylaw, or is it a policy? Does the region have them and municipalities do not? Which municipalities do and which don't? How do we classify residential versus commercial versus industrial versus other? There are all these different categories that have different rates applied to them. It is an extremely confusing and contentious topic, and
so glad I brought it up.
Yeah, perfect segue, because what do manufacturers want and need? Well, how about no surprises and as much consistency as we can get?
So that was a very long definition, but I appreciate it, because I think it's an important subject that I think a lot of people I just are simply not aware of, or because why would you be if you're not an industrial business, if you're not a business owner? It's probably not something that you would think about, but it is an important part of the economic development future of Grimsby and the region. That's a fantastic segue to some more fun questions. As you know, it's a municipal election year. So come next year, we're going to have a new council. And so what would you hope the candidates for council and mayor understand about the NIA, industry, how Grimsby can support industry, why Grimsby can support industry? Because I know development, of course, is a very hot button subject in Grimsby, usually more on the residential side than the industrial side. I don't know that people have as strong opinions about our industrial development, but what would you hope that the next council both understands and meets you at?
Yeah, I've actually kind of been, and you just reminded me, Daniel, that I haven't done Grimsby yet. I call it my dog and pony show, kind of going and speaking to councils, just at a typical council meeting. and not to ask for anything necessarily and not to complain about anything, but to remind councils of the sector and its importance, and that the NIA is kind of here as a conduit to that, to the businesses and,
sure.
and a support mechanism for them. Because as you said, the outset of this, for some reason, a lot of people just don't know about the NIA, and here we are, we're here to help. The manufacturing sector, these small companies, they need a couple of things. They need consistency. I always find it ironic. We talk about all that's going on in the States and Trump and the tariffs, and he changes his mind every day. And how can anybody, plan anything, because there's just constant chaos. And all we have to do here is take a page out of that book to say, well, if that is going to be disruptive and chaotic and unclear and inconsistent, can we try to be consistent in our own backyard? Consistent, clear, have good, strong policies that are, long-term, as opposed to like, well, maybe this exists now, but if we don't like the budget next time, we're going to change it, et cetera. So I think consistency is number one. And the other thing that I think is really important is what I call, true partnership. We have the benefit here in the region of having a regional economic development office, and we also have 9 of the 12 municipalities have economic development offices. You guys have a fantastic one here. Those folks do a really good job of kind of partnering with the local companies and what do you need, and let's try to make that happen. I think councils need to listen to their AcDev folks and understand that their focus is to help get business growth to stay here. Mm-hmm. And I think the more we're aware of the details behind what these companies are doing and what they need, and then bringing that forward to the decision makers, can be super helpful. Oftentimes on my dog and pony show, I'll have counselors approach me after my little talk and say, like, numbers you were referring to, I didn't think I thought manufacturing was dead in Niagara. And so keeping those communication lines opening and letting folks know what is going on and what the benefit can be. COVID really put us on the map, I think, as a sector here, because we know Niagara as a strong tourism destination. We know Niagara as a strong kind of wine and beer place. We got a ton of wineries and all that stuff. But something like COVID happens and all that goes away in terms of economic stability. Manufacturing largely was able to stay open, so to say. And the sector actually grew coming out of COVID here in Niagara. So, we have to have strength coming from, the core 4 sectors here in different ways and levels. But I think the needs for manufacturing is a little bit different.
Sure.
And the more that we can find ways to keep our companies competitive, the better they're going to do here, and the more chance that we have that they're going to stay and continue to grow.
Yeah, which of course is just going to enable the town to continue to grow and bring more jobs, more people, and improve the long-term viability of Grimsby and Niagara, which I think is fantastic. And I was really interested earlier when you mentioned mom and pop manufacturing, because I think when you say manufacturing, people are thinking like steel mills and massive industrial fields, and the idea of like a 1 to 10 employee place that has considerably lower, footprint, overhead, but is still manufacturing, still making something that the economy needs. Is I think that's really cool, and the kind of thing that if we start folding in some of those other concepts like AI and 3D printing and other technologies, I think people, if you say industrial manufacturing in Grimsby, they're going to say, well, where would you put that?
Right.
But it doesn't have to be stuff like ATCO. It can be smaller things and still supporting and building something diverse and interesting in the economy.
Yeah, there's tons of that. Yeah, manufacturing is always, I shouldn't say this because it's not meant to be a criticism. Again, I was a manufacturer and I sucked at it too. We don't market ourselves very well. We don't tell our stories very well. That's another thing that the NIA tries to do, is kind of draw out the cool things that are going on here in very small corners oftentimes, but we're sending widgets all across the world. And sometimes they're not widgets. Sometimes they're parts the size of, this room.
Sure.
We have Post Foods is one of our members in Niagara Falls. They manufacture cereal,
Sure, yeah.
Shreddies, things.
Yeah. Food manufacturing is also a kind of manufacturing. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's not just like gears and car parts.
In huge, like you say, huge fields, massive factories, like plumes of smoke coming out of the stacks, like it's changed.
Final takeaways. We've talked a lot about industry and development and a surprisingly uplifting economic story that you don't hear a whole lot. A little bit. Cautiously optimistic, it sounds like, would be a fair take. Obviously, we seem to be on about a 2-year clock. Every 2 years, something horrible seems to happen that causes us all to change our entire business models. But like you said, smaller businesses tend to be a lot more agile and flexible, and I think that's great, and we love to see the strength and resilience of all types of industry. But yeah, final takeaways for the NIA, what you guys are working on, what you're hoping for the next term of council, and sort of last thoughts.
Yeah, sure. We've got a lot kind of brewing in the background right now, both as an association as well as kind of a broader community partner, I would say. Workforce, despite all that's going on with tariffs, despite that's going on with, all the local talks, the biggest challenge for most of our manufacturers remains workforce.
Sure.
Both current and future. It's, hey, we need more people today. We need them to be skilled. We need them to show up and all that good stuff. But we're also looking into our future and, wondering if we plan to grow, where are the people going to come from? Yeah. So workforce is very high on our priority list. And as I say, we have great conversations going on with our secondary and post-secondary institutions. I'm happy to report that at the secondary level, we're starting to see, I think, a shifting of the tides with youth, and maybe more importantly, parents of youth, pushing their kids into, or at least allowing them to explore the trades and manufacturing.
I've seen that a lot as well. I employ a lot of youth. And I think, again, AI has a lot to do with that. It's a job that can't be replaced by ChatGPT.
That's right. Well, and it can be complemented, I think, and it can be, we need young people, back to some of these legacy ownership groups. If you're 70 years old and you really don't want to learn AI, hire a young person in your manufacturing operation to figure out how you can maybe integrate it into your day-to-day. Mm-hmm. But we are seeing that shift where, 5 years ago, maybe even less, we would go to job fairs and stuff and try to talk to young people about, a job in the trades or a job in manufacturing. And it was like, my mom doesn't want me to do that.
Sure.
My dad says I need to become a teacher.
They want me to go to university. They want me to get a degree. That was very much the attitude when I was in high school.
Absolutely.
Which was longer ago than I want to think about.
Yeah, me too. But even just a few years ago, that was often the message. Now we're kind of seeing the opposite, where it's, the mom is kind of dragging the kid up to our booth or somewhere to go talk to somebody who can explain what types of jobs are available here. Where do I have to go to school? What does an apprenticeship look like? Things like that. So I think that's really good. I think that the focus, and we're talking, Brock University now has an engineering program. They're in their second year of intake, which is really cool. I think that's, super helpful for attracting, when we're talking to attracting new companies that are looking for engineers, for example. We can now say that we have that. Niagara College continues to be a strong partner. But we also have to, we can't lose sight over, this is something that has to happen quickly, is what I'm trying to say. We can't spend years changing curriculums and, trying to work with the ministry to figure out, okay, is this program a little dated? How are we going to make it updated? By the time we get through that, it's going to change again.
Yeah.
So, I think there are other models out there that can be complementary to traditional institutions around training and upskilling. I'm big on micro-credentialing, rather than forcing young people into a 2 or 3 year program that's very prescriptive and rigid. Sometimes you just need to learn certain things that you don't need 2 years to figure out. What is inventory control? How do I use an ERP system in an operation? quality management and quality systems. There's all these kind of peripheral manufacturing concepts that could be taught in more of a micro-credentialing style. So a lot around workforce. The conversation will continue. You know, what I and we would like to see councils and decision makers in the region pay attention to is, one, just to understand and recognize manufacturing as a vital and critical sector for this region, because we are a little bit more recession-proof perhaps than some of the other sectors, et cetera. So it is that awareness, and it's awareness as to the growth that we're seeing, but it's also asking the question, what do manufacturers need to succeed? And really taking those feedbacks to heart and seeing what can be done about them. I know, you know, sometimes there are barriers and things that come in the way where there's simply nothing that decision makers can do to help. But I think by having the conversation and listening, it at least brings people closer to the middle of saying, well, you know, maybe we can't do that, but what if we were able to do this? Would that help? I want to see manufacturing I want those numbers to continue to go up here.
For sure. Jordan, thank you so much for joining me today. I this has been awesome. I learned a lot about NIA and manufacturing. Really appreciate it. And I hope everybody enjoyed learning some more about a sector that I think a lot of people don't think enough about. Final plugs for the NIA. You guys have a website?
We have a website. NiagaraIndustry.com. Check it out. Follow us on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, if any of your listeners have questions, they want to know more about the numbers that we talked about, how to partner with the community, you know, the manufacturing sector, any bright ideas or initiatives on how we can help, you know, how we can work together to help the sector continue to be strong, reach out to me, Jordan at NiagaraIndustry.com. And thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So thanks again to Jordan, our guest. Thanks to Cornerstone Association of Realtors for being our series sponsor. And thanks to Bright Workspace for our studio sponsorship, this amazing studio, which you can also use if you would like to book this space or any other Bright Workspace amenities. Check out brightworkspace.com.
Beautiful.
Jordan, thanks again. And stay connected, Grimsey.